motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Deontay Wilder has been dropped out of the Ring Magazine heavyweight rankings. Deontay Wilder is a fighter who has only won one fight in approximately the last 4 going on 5 years. Remember,
Yes.
in early 2020, he loses to Tyson Fury, loses to him again in 2021, returns to action and beats Robert Helenius in late 2022, loses to Joseph Parker in late 2023, and he just lost this past weekend
To Zhang.
to Zile Chang. Really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? That in the last 4 going on 5 years, the guy's only won one fight. It would seem that as soon as Deontay Wilder stepped up his opponent, stepped up in competition, that's as soon as it took him to start losing.
Isn't that what I always said would happen?
Do you want me to say it nicer? It would seem that in an effort to reinvigorate heavyweight boxing here in America, there are those out there who did everything they could to put Deontay on a pedestal, but when push came to shove,
He couldn't hack it.
when he lost to Tyson Fury in 2020, I said, this guy's done. He's never going to be a champion again. He's never going to be part of that short list of names, that short list of heavyweights that managed to reclaim a title after losing it. No, not Wilder. He doesn't have the ability, the skills
To fall back on.
It's hard for punchers, if you even want to call Wilder that, but it's hard for them because they're so reliant on their ability to hurt their opponent and to knock them out that the moment that bubble bursts, they're not really the same.
You're gonna have to call on something else to win fights, and Wilder doesn't have that something else, that extra.
His old buddy Malik Scotch couldn't give it to him. How long has he been with Malik now? What's it been? 2, 3 fights with Malik? And
It's like he was trying to turn Wilder into more of a boxer and more of a thinker, but what are we, 15 to 16 years into his pro career, over 40 fights? You're a bit late.
it's a bit late in the game to try and reinvent the wheel. A part of Deontay Wilder's downfall was the false sense of confidence, the false sense of security that he built up over time, regularly fighting overmatched opponents that were there to be hit, that were there to be knocked out. And that's where his hefty knockout percentage comes from.
Stat padding.
I've always said it was stat padding. That if Daniel Dubois, or Joe Joyce, or Derek Chisora spent the first 7 years of their careers fighting the kind of fighters that Wilder was fighting, they'd be the Bronze Bomber. They'd be regarded as all-time great punchers.
Who did he knock out that was worth remembering?
None of his contemporaries from the Klitschko era, none of the contemporaries from this one. That as soon as he stepped up in class, that's as soon as it took for him to start losing, because the good fighters, the solid ones, they're harder to knock out.
The other day, Paulie Malignaggi asked, where would Deontay Wilder rank on an all-time great list?
We talked about that in a previous video. Talk about this. Michael Benson asks, if Deontay Wilder does retire now, who takes his place as the hardest puncher in boxing today?
Who said he's the hardest puncher in boxing today?
I never said he was the hardest puncher in boxing today, and I don't regard him as the hardest puncher in boxing today. What are we talking about? Hardest puncher pound for pound? That could be Naoya Inoue, who has remained a hard puncher throughout 4 divisions. That could be Artur Beterbiev, who's literally knocked out everyone that he's fought.
And unlike Wilder, he's fought the top tier, the top shelf guys in his division. He's not just knocking out stiffs, he's knocking out top contenders and champions.
So where does Michael Benson get that Deontay Wilder is the hardest puncher in the sport today? I wouldn't say that.
Where does that assertion come from?
I wouldn't even say he's the hardest puncher in the heavyweight division.
No.
I wouldn't.
He's not.
In the historical sense, or the contemporary sense, the version of Bermain Stavern that he fought the first time, he didn't finish him. He didn't knock him out. I would pick Anthony Joshua or Zile Zhang or Derek Chisora to knock out the same Bermain Stavern that he won the WBC title from.
And he didn't knock him out.
I would have picked Alexander Povetkin, Vladimir Klitschko, or Vitaly Klitschko to knock out the Bermain Stavern that Wilder couldn't knock out.
Samuel Peter.
Shannon Briggs. I think that if any one of them fought the Bermain Stavern that Wilder fought, that fight don't go to distance. They stopped that guy, but Wilder couldn't.
And he's supposed to be the hardest puncher in the division, an all-time great puncher? Are you sure?
And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking to yourself, well, he did stop him in the second fight. He did stop him in the rematch, but in the rematch, he was 2 years inactive and older.
You needed 2 fights with Bermain Stavern to get 1 knockout?
You do realize that a rather unheralded heavyweight in Demetrius King only needed one fight to knock out Bermane Stiverne. One fight, just one fight. And that was well before Deontay Wilder fought him. So you'll excuse me for saying so. I don't think Wilder's an all-time great puncher, and I don't even think he's the biggest puncher of this era.
But he can punch.
Yeah, I think he can punch. Of course he can punch. But no more than Philippe Rogovic can punch or Daniel Dubois can punch.
He's done absolutely nothing that he should be thought of as being head and shoulders a bigger puncher than those guys are.
Or than the Klitschko brothers were. For a perspective, Vladimir Klitschko has more knockouts than Deontay Wilder has fights. Vladimir Klitschko has 53 recorded knockouts to Deontay Wilder's 42 across 48 fights. 48! He literally has less fights than Vladimir Klitschko has knockouts, and I don't see people calling Vladimir Klitschko an all-time great puncher.
Not the way they talk about Wilder. They talk about Wilder like he was this era's Foreman.
He didn't do it at the level of a Vladimir Klitschko. Top contender after top contender after top contender for 9 years, reigning as a unified champion. Wilder never unified.
Wilder doesn't hold any heavyweight records that would suggest he's this all-time great puncher.
No. The heavyweight with the most knockouts or technical knockouts in the history of boxing is Primo Carnera.
71 knockouts.
Ranked right behind Primo at number 2 is George Foreman.
He had 68 knockouts.
Ranked right behind George is Vladimir Klitschko, who I just mentioned. He had 53 knockouts.
Ranked at number 4 is the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis. He had 52 knockouts. Max Spear, he had 51.
See what I'm getting at? Wilder don't hold no heavyweight records for knockouts. No. Primo Carnera's got the most knockouts. Shannon Briggs, he's got the most first-round knockouts.
37 first-round knockouts.
And that's just the ones in the first round. It's 37 knockouts in the first round, 53 knockouts overall. More than Wilder.
Shannon Briggs is yet another fighter with more knockouts than Wilder has fights.
Thus, I don't consider Deontay Wilder an all-time great puncher, and in a very general sense in this era, who did he knock out that was worth remembering? Anthony Joshua's knockout over Povetkin. Povetkin is a better fighter than any fighter Wilder knocked out.
I don't think Wilder's a bigger puncher than AJ or Zhilei Zhang, who knocked him out this past weekend.
A time of reflection. Now that Deontay Wilder may be retiring, his mother, Deborah Wilder, has urged her son to retire from boxing following his defeat to Zhilei Chang. I texted him and said, "Son, we're having a party for you. You gave us the best boxing in the United States when boxing was dead."
Boxing wasn't dead.
Come on, what do you expect his mother to say? She said, "You gave us the best boxing when boxing was dead. You've gotten older. You've ran your course on your journey. It's time to celebrate. Enjoy your life now. Teach other young men how to become champions."
She's right.
I completely agree. Deontay Wilder has neither the fundamentals, the coordination, or the cardio
Time's not on his side.
to keep fighting. It's a wonder that a fighter of such limited ability made it this far, though if he did, it's largely in part due to soft matchmaking. Understand that Wilder does come from an Olympic pedigree. He is a bronze medalist. And Olympians, unlike some other boxers, they are expected to hit the ground running when they enter into the pros. Wilder didn't. Wilder spent the first 7 years of his career fighting no-hopers, fat cruiserweights, and club fighters for about 7 years and 32 fights. Not becoming of an Olympian, but that's what he did. He was under the Golden Boy Protection Program first.
People tend to forget that he was a Golden Boy Promotions fighter first. Then he went to the PBC along with all those other fighters.
And it's really not like his quality of competition got much better when he got over there. He was protected over there too.
Remember when he won a WBC title?
The night he won a WBC title from Bermane Stiverne, do you remember what his longtime manager Shelley Finkel said? This was after 33 fights. 33 fights, 7 years as a pro, having become a world champion. He said that Wilder was a baby. He said that Wilder was a baby winning a belt. When asked if they would fight Vladimir Klitschko straight away, he put it off.
They didn't want to unify.
What he wanted was for Wilder to have a couple of voluntary title defenses. That's what he wanted because he didn't think he was ready for Vladimir after 7 years in the game and 33 professional bouts. So if you're wondering, how is it that a fighter of such limited ability made it this far for this long, it's because they matched him as soft as they possibly could.
For as long as they could.
And they had every intention to keep doing that until they picked a cherry that blew up in their face. a cherry bomb, as it were. They chose to pursue Fury instead of Anthony Joshua for the undisputed. They chose to pursue him, prioritized him, and he, in effect, became Wilder's undoing.
That heralded the beginning of the end.
Oh, there are still a lot of arguments. There are still a lot of conversations about whose fault it was. Whose fault was it really that Wilder and Anthony Joshua never fought? But need I remind you, Wilder's team didn't want him to unify with Klitschko, and you really think they wanted him to unify with Anthony?
Are you stupid?
You fell for the optics, like many Americans and some Brits who happen to back Tyson Fury.
Let's cut the fucking malarkey. The only reason they talk up Wilder is so that they can keep talking up Tyson Fury. That's all it is.
Wilder should retire. There's nothing left to do. The saving grace for him is that in spite of his limited skill set, he did manage to make a lot of money. He did manage to better his situation and living circumstances. That's the silver lining in all of this, that in spite of all his drawbacks and limitations...
He had a successful boxing career, you could say that.
I believe that with these last two fights, the Joseph Parker fight, the more recent Zilei Chang fight, that just added to his bank account. I mean, I think he should have enough money that he can retire.
Retire from boxing, pursue other things, maybe acting. He's always had a knack for theatricality.
He can do that. But if you're wondering, how is it a fighter of such limited ability lasted this long and made it this far, it's because they protected him. They protected him for as long as they could. And as soon as they stepped him up, he started to unravel. It really is as simple as that. Tony Bellew reacted to this past weekend's action with an image of both Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder, saying, "This is what happens when politics get in the way of great fights. We have been robbed of a true classic here. I wish Deontay Wilder well and hope he now thinks about his wealth and ultimately his health. When there is a huge fight there to be made, make it."
Why didn't they?
This is a longer conversation than we have time for here and now. But the gist of it is, this fight didn't happen because of American exceptionalism, American entitlement.
It wasn't politics because the situation was a lot less political. In those days, DAZN had not yet debuted in America.
Matchroom did not have some exclusive U.S. broadcast partner or relationship that they had to honor. The opportunity was there to make this fight. And if it didn't happen, it wasn't really due to politics so much as American exceptionalism, American entitlement, and egos. Deontay Wilder's overblown ego and sense of self that was, put simply, out of control.
That's what it was.
The conversation doesn't really become a conversation until Anthony Joshua's big fight, his big night with Vladimir Klitschko, a pay-per-view that broke records in the United Kingdom. Huge gate, huge stadium fight, huge numbers from all around the world, even right here in America. Both HBO and Showtime paid $1 million apiece to be able to air the fight here in America.
This is back when they were in boxing. That's how long ago this is.
Unbeknownst to many Americans at the time, Anthony Joshua was already a box office star. He was already a pay-per-view star. You think the Klitschko fight was his first pay-per-view? It wasn't.
Anthony Joshua was a star coming out of the amateurs into the pros. That just amplified it, the aesthetic of the match and how it played out and what it was for.
The Americans either didn't understand that at the time or didn't want to, that Anthony Joshua was the A-side to Deontay Wilder. He was generating revenue the likes of which Wilder wasn't generating here in America. Wilder hadn't even been on pay-per-view yet. That doesn't happen until much later on with Tyson Fury.
Several failed attempts by Matchroom to make the fight with Wilder. What was the holdup, you ask? Wilder felt that he should get whatever Anthony gets.
That's the gist of it. We can get into each individual offer and how much it was worth versus what Wilder was making at the time and how each offer was bigger than what Wilder was making and each offer that followed was bigger than the last, but that's the gist of it. Wilder felt that he's supposed to get half the pot.
American entitlement.
When no fighter in Anthony's position worth what he was worth at the time and no promoter in Eddie Hearns' position would so easily concede Giving up half the pot to a guy who's bringing one belt to the table when most of the money is coming from them.
The marquee value is coming from them.
Even now, I'm not sure that Team Wilder ever wanted that fight, because it always seemed to me like what they were trying to do was use the synergy and attention from that fight, that conversation, I should say, to make Wilder a self-sustaining organism here in America, to boost his profile to where he can sell his own fights without Anthony Joshua, because they knew they couldn't A-side him in the boardroom, at the negotiation table. They knew this guy's worth a lot more money than we are.
I remember what the talking points were. That Wilder's supposed to get half the pot, and if he doesn't, there ain't no fight.
They would never expect an American fighter in Anthony Joshua's position, who's worth more money, clearly worth more money, and is in possession of more alphabet titles, 3 of them.
They'd never expect an American to concede A-side status the way they were expecting Anthony to concede A-side status.
And in a very general sense, that's just not the way things are done. If Evander Holyfield would have took the stance that Wilder took with AJ, Evander would have never got a Mike Tyson fight, let alone 2 of them.
Evander knew his role. He knew he was the B-side, and he knew he had to make sacrifices for the bigger picture. Wilder, on the other hand,
Wilder didn't want to play ball because his ego wouldn't let him. On top of Stefan Espinoza and Showtime being an obstacle, they were being an obstacle.
which is funny, because Deontay Wilder was not, nor has he ever been, exclusively contracted to Showtime.
How do you know he wasn't signed to Showtime?
Because he migrated from Showtime over to Fox as soon as the PBC jumped into bed with them. If he was exclusively contracted to Showtime, he can't go over there and fight on Fox, because when Fox eats, Showtime don't shit.
They're not the same network. They don't even fall under the same umbrella. The point is, Showtime was being an obstacle. Wilder was being an egomaniac.
And that's why the fight didn't happen. If it would have happened, the fight between Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder would have been bigger, much bigger, than the fight we saw 2 weeks ago with Fury and Usyk.
I think that thing could have did transatlantically anywhere in between 3 to 4 million pay-per-view buys, because when the heavyweights are fighting, there's nothing like it.
The numbers this fight could have brought in, at its peak, would have been monstrous.
Could have been. But if you've been with this channel long enough, if you've been with this channel for the last 4 or 5 years, you'll know I said it plenty of times. This is gonna be the one that got away. The same way that Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis never fought is the same way these guys will never fight.
And there was a last gasp, a last ray of hope last year, that if Wilder beats Parker, he'll fight AJ next. But he lost.
People still try to blame Eddie Hearn. They still try to blame AJ for this. Well, the truth is, it's Wilder's fault, and it was always Wilder's fault, because one way or another, he didn't want it bad enough.